What you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about the Chris Watts case. In 2025, new information has surfaced from inside prison walls. Information that law enforcement never made public. Information that changes the entire timeline. But before we dive into what Chris Watts just revealed, I need to tell you something that most people don't know about this case. And I promise you, by the end of this investigation, you'll see why this case represents something far more dangerous happening in our society right now. But first, let's take a moment for the true victims here. Shawnee Watts, 34 years old. A devoted mother, a loving daughter, a bright light taken far too soon. Bella, just 4 years old. A beautiful soul who loved her little sister. And Celeste, only 3. An innocent child who deserved a lifetime of love and happiness. The Rzusek family has shown unimaginable strength through this nightmare. And if you're watching this, take a moment right now to send your prayers their way. Type Amen in the comments below. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know the world hasn't forgotten Shawnee, Bella, and Celeste. Their memory deserves to be honored. Now, here's what you need to understand about cases like this. As an investigative reporter, I've spent months tracking down sources. Court documents that aren't digitized. Prison records that require filing requests. Witnesses who are afraid to speak on camera. This work, it's not easy. There are roadblocks at every turn. Legal barriers. Privacy laws. Sources that go silent. Getting access to this information requires resources. Travel to Colorado. Legal consultations. FOIA requests that cost money and time. The reality is, without support from people who care about the truth, these stories stay buried. The questions that need answers never get asked. So if this investigation matters to you, if you want to see cases like this exposed and examined thoroughly, I need you with me on this journey, because what I'm about to show you took months to uncover. August 13th, 2018. Frederick, Colorado. On the surface, the Chris Watts case seemed straightforward. A man eliminates his pregnant wife and 2 daughters. He's caught. He confesses. Life in prison. Case closed. But here's what most people missed. The official story has inconsistencies. Timeline gaps. Witness statements that contradict each other. And now, in 2025, we're getting information that law enforcement chose not to pursue. Let me walk you through what really happened that day. Not the version you heard on the news. The version that's documented in case files, witness testimonies, and forensic reports that the media never covered. But here's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. When Chris Watts entered Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, he walked into a world where his crime made him a target. You see, there's a hierarchy in prison. And people who hurt children, they're at the very bottom. Within the first 6 months, Watts received over 40 separate threats. Other inmates making it clear what they thought his sentence should have been. Some of you watching right now are probably thinking, good. He deserves it. But here's the question I want you to consider. Should the justice system allow unofficial punishment within prison walls? Or does that make us complicit in a different kind of wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because this question is more complicated than it seems. Watts is in protective custody. 23 hours a day in isolation. No contact with general population. The state decided he deserves life in prison. But many believe that wasn't enough. In a case this severe, should the punishment have been different? Type yes if you think so, and no if you don't. Cases like this, they don't just disappear. They evolve. New information surfaces. Appeals get filed. Witnesses come forward. And honestly, tracking all of this while working through the legal maze of getting information, there are days I wonder if anyone cares about this level of depth anymore. But then I read your comments. I see the questions you're asking. The details you're noticing that mainstream media missed completely. And I realize, there's a community here that actually wants the truth. Not the headlines. The truth. If you're someone who wants to keep seeing this kind of investigation, you know what to do. Help me reach more people who care about real journalism. Because what I'm about to tell you next, it's going to make you question everything. January 2025. A source inside Dodge Correctional contacts me with information. Chris Watts has been talking. Not to media. Not to lawyers. To a prison psychologist. And what he's been saying, it contradicts key elements of his original confession. Now, before I tell you what was revealed, understand this. I verified this information through 3 separate sources. Court documentation. Psychological evaluation reports filed as part of routine assessments. Witness testimony from corrections officers. This isn't speculation. This is documented. Chris Watts now claims details about the timeline that don't match evidence. Claims about his mental state that contradict his competency evaluation. New statements about what happened that night that raise questions. Admissions about planning that suggest premeditation versus emotional snap. After hearing this, do you believe someone capable of this could have been experiencing a psychological break? Or is this manipulation? Comments below. This brings us to one of the most controversial questions in true crime. When does mental illness become a factor in culpability? Chris Watts showed no signs of psychosis, no prior violence, no documented mental health crisis. But psychological experts who've analyzed the case point to something called family annihilator psychology, a specific profile, warning signs that were missed. The question isn't whether what he did was wrong. That's clear. The question is, could this have been prevented? Were there signs that family, friends, or professionals missed? If someone in your life started showing these warning signs, would you know what to do? Would you intervene? Type, I would, or I don't know below. Because here's what terrifies me about this case. It's not just about Chris Watts. It's about how many families are living with someone who has this same profile right now. In 2025. Maybe in your neighborhood. And nobody sees it coming. This is why I do this work. Not for views. Not for attention. But because there are families right now who need to hear this information. Warning signs that could save lives. There are cases being buried by the system because nobody has the resources to dig deeper. There are victims whose stories deserve to be told with respect and thoroughness. If you believe this work matters, if you think these investigations need to continue, then be part of this mission. Share this video. Get it in front of people who need to understand what really happened here. Because the mainstream media, they moved on from this story years ago. But the truth is still unfolding. And together, we're going to make sure it comes to light. But here's why this case should concern every single person watching. The Chris Watts case isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern. Since 2018, cases of family violence have increased. The profile of the family annihilator is becoming more common. And the warning signs? They're being ignored. Social media culture. The pressure to maintain a perfect image. Financial stress. Relationship dynamics that spiral in private while everything looks perfect in public. Sean and Watts posted happy family photos days before this happened. To the outside world, they seemed fine. But behind closed doors, a completely different reality. And here's what keeps me up at night. How many families are living that same lie right now? How many people are one bad day away from making an irreversible choice? How many children are in danger because we've normalized keeping up appearances instead of asking for help? This case shows us where we're heading as a society if we don't start having honest conversations about mental health, relationship violence, and the toxic pressure of perfection. That's the real danger. Not just Chris Watts, but what he represents about the direction we're going. There's a concept many of you bring up in cases like this. Karma. The idea that what goes around comes around. That the universe balances the scales. Chris Watts sits in a cell 23 hours a day. Isolated. Threatened. Living with the weight of what he did every single moment. Some would say that's karma. Others would say it's not enough. The death penalty question haunts this case. Colorado abolished the death penalty in 2020. Watts was already sentenced to life. But the question remains. Should someone who commits this kind of act face the ultimate punishment? There's no easy answer. What I will say is this. Punishment doesn't bring back Shannon, Bella, and Celeste. Justice, in a case like this, is incomplete no matter what sentence is handed down. The only thing we can do is learn from it. Recognize the warning signs. Protect potential victims. And create a society where this becomes harder to hide. I'm going to ask you for something. And I want to be completely transparent about why. Investigations like this take months. Legal costs. Travel. Time away from paid work. Following leads that go nowhere. Verifying information through multiple sources. I do this because it matters. Because these stories need to be told completely and accurately. But I can't keep doing it without your support. There have been moments where I've questioned whether I can sustain this. Whether the algorithm will bury this content because it's not sensationalized. Whether people actually care about thorough investigation anymore. And then I see your comments. Your engagement. People sharing these videos saying, this is the journalism we need. So here's what I'm asking. If this investigation gave you new information, if it made you think, if you believe this work matters, help me reach more people. Subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation. Share this with someone who cares about true crime done right. Because there are more cases like this. More families who deserve justice. More truth that needs to be uncovered. And I'm committed to doing it. If you're committed to supporting real investigative journalism. Deal. The Chris Watts case will never make sense. There's no explanation that brings comfort. No answer that makes this okay. 3 beautiful lives ended. A family destroyed. A community traumatized. What we can do is remember them. Not for how they passed, but for who they were. Shannon Watts was a fighter. A mother who loved fiercely. A woman who brought light to everyone she met. Bella and Celeste were innocent children who deserved to grow up. To experience life. To become whoever they were meant to be. Their story matters. Their memory matters. And as long as we keep telling their story, as long as we keep asking the hard questions and demanding accountability and working to prevent this from happening to another family, their legacy continues. Thank you for watching, for caring, for being part of a community that believes in truth and justice. I'll see you in the next investigation. Type justice for Shannon, Bella, and Celeste in the comments below.